Let's jump right into this explainer. We are unpacking a massive, hidden global energy crisis today. And honestly, it's wild how few people are actually talking about it. Right now, there is this severe vulnerability baked into the global supply chain, hiding right in plain sight behind the daily headlines. And it has the potential to shake up literally everything, from global manufacturing output to the actual price of food sitting on your kitchen table tonight. So, what is the real energy crisis? Look, if you open a financial paper today, what do you see? Everyone is just intensely focused on oil, right? They're watching Brent crude hover around that $100 mark, completely fixated on the blockades and the Middle East disruptions. But honestly, that's a massive misdirection. The real crisis, the actual choke point that could break the global system, is something else entirely. Okay, let's dive into this and look at what's really going on beneath the surface. Now, what's really interesting here is the stark contrast between crude oil and liquefied natural gas, or LNG. See, with crude, we've built in all these redundancies over the decades. If a major shipping lane gets blocked, well, Saudi Arabia has the East-West pipeline. They can bypass traditional routes and pump 5 million barrels a day straight to the Red Sea. The UAE has the 80 COP pipeline to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. Plus, countries have those massive strategic crude reserves sitting around. But LNG? No pipelines for this. Zero. There are no massive strategic reserves just waiting to be tapped. LNG is completely, 100%, trapped by its geography. Which brings us to the Hormuz bottleneck, the choke point without a bypass. To really grasp why this is so critical, we need to peel back the first layer of this mystery and focus on that specific geographical trap in the Middle East. Take a second to process this number, 77 million. That's 77 million tons of LNG that Qatar exports every single year. They're one of the absolute largest exporters on the planet, and this single massive number is what powers factories, heats homes, and keeps economies humming all over the globe. But here is the fatal flaw in the whole system. 100% of that 77 million tons absolutely must transit through the Strait of Hormuz because LNG needs those specialized, supercooled carrier ships, and because, again, zero alternative pipelines exist, there is no plan B. None. It's kind of like owning $1 million sports car, but your driveway is permanently bricked up. With the strait facing severe disruptions, this instantly becomes the hardest physical constraint in the entire global energy market. It's the absolute rule of no workarounds. Moving on to the first victim of all this, China's industrial slowdown. So, what actually happens when an unstoppable force meets an unmovable geographical bottleneck? We move from abstract logistics right into immediate macroeconomic pain. And this brilliantly illustrates that shift. Looking at the data from January to May, total Chinese LNG imports dropped by 15%. That's already a pretty significant industrial slowdown. But look at the Middle Eastern supply volumes to China. They crashed by a staggering 43%. We're talking a drop from over 15 million tons down to just under 9 million tons in a matter of months. So that Middle Eastern supply is crashing nearly 3 times as fast as the overall average. Now for the cascade effect, how this goes from shipping routes straight to your kitchen table. Let's move along and see how this actually builds, because this isn't just some abstract industrial issue happening a world away. It triggers a wild 4-step domino effect across the global supply chain. Step 1, we get the LNG shortage we just talked about. Step 2, well, natural gas isn't just for heating. It's actually a vital feedstock for the petrochemical industry, so a shortage there means rising sulfur costs. Step 3, sulfur is absolutely critical for agriculture, which means we get highly expensive fertilizer. And step 4, when it costs a lot more to grow crops, we get higher global food prices. It's a direct, literal line from a blocked strait to your grocery bill. To put some specific numbers to this agricultural squeeze, China alone imports 47% of its sulfur for fertilizer production straight from the Gulf states. And how does all that sulfur arrive? Yup, right through the Strait of Hormuz. And to make matters worse, this tightening of the sulfur supply is happening right now, during the absolutely crucial spring planting season. It's pretty wild to think that a delayed ship in the Middle East is directly dictating the cost of seeds going into the ground in Asia today. The timing literally could not be worse, and it virtually guarantees higher agricultural input costs for the coming harvest cycle. Now, you might be wondering, can't these ships just sail a different way? I mean, technically yes, but the cost of detouring around the Cape of Good Hope is astronomical. We're talking about tacking on an extra 9,000 to 11,000 kilometers to the journey. Operating an LNG carrier costs up to $35,000 a day. So this detour adds an extra 12 to 16 days of pure transit time, completely wrecking delivery schedules, and it tacks on an additional $2.25 to $3.5 million per voyage. And that cost, it doesn't just evaporate. It gets passed directly down the chain. And the market is reacting exactly how you'd expect. Spot LNG prices for European delivery have already surged by up to $3.60 per million British thermal units above the pre-closure baseline. But here's the kicker. It's not an isolated regional issue. Because of the sheer shortage, Europe and Asia are now locked in an intense bidding war. They are actively fighting for the exact same flexible LNG ships. The price impact is cascading globally and simultaneously. Which leads us to the looming winter threat, the ticking clock. This brings us to the absolute most urgent part of this explainer. The immediate pain is bad enough, sure, but there is a ticking clock on a much larger threat looming just over the horizon. 25%. That is how much China's imports of liquefied petroleum gas, or LPG, are already down. This is the fuel that's desperately needed not just for the petrochemical demand we talked about earlier, but for rural heating. If we look at the timeline here, you can see the seasonal math at play. In phase 1, spring and summer, the disruption starts, but it's kind of masked because, well, heating demand is naturally low. But phase 2, autumn, is when the crucial restocking window traditionally happens, and because of these shipping constraints, that window is rapidly closing. If this disruption persists, we hit phase 3, winter. That brings a catastrophic dual crunch, where surging heating demands collide head-on with petrochemical shortfalls. And if you're holding out hope that some other global player might just swoop in and save the day, well, Australia, which is China's other major supplier, is actually seeing its LNG sales contract year over year right now, too. The non-Middle Eastern supply simply cannot compensate for the massive hole left by the Qatar disruption. Basically, there is no bailout coming from the East. It creates this incredibly claustrophobic sense of inevitability in the global energy market. So the new paradigm, watch LNG, not Brent. So what does this all mean? The absolute crucial point is this. Oil has bypasses. Crude has reserves. LNG has neither. It literally is a mic drop summary of the whole situation. This is the unique, fatal vulnerability of liquefied natural gas. It is entirely exposed to the geographic realities of the world in a way that traditional crude oil simply isn't anymore. So if you want to understand where the next massive economic shock is going to come from, stop watching Brent crude. Seriously, watch LNG spot prices. That is where the real unfiltered signal is hiding. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Drop a comment below on how you think these rising costs are going to impact global manufacturing. And make sure you subscribed because in our next explainer, we're going to dive even deeper into that hidden fertilizer crisis this LNG bottleneck is creating. You definitely won't want to miss it. Catch you then.